Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Poema podcast. I am James Prescott, your host. Welcome back to the show. It's really great to have you all here again. And I'm excited to welcome back to the show a good friend of mine. He's been on the show quite a few times now. I've actually lost count of how many times. It's got to be about 4 or 5, I think. But they are a dear friend and a tarot reader. Welcome to the show, Kat Dean.
Thank you, James. I was just thinking, actually, same question. I was like, how many times have I been on? It's got to be, it's been 4 or 5 for sure.
Yeah, like when was the first time you were on? It was like 2021 or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That feels like a lifetime ago.
I know, right? The pandemic feels like ages ago. I can't
Yeah.
even. I mean, like, no, sorry. I mean the lockdown feels like ages ago. That's what I mean.
Right. No,
Um,
I know.
yeah. So, yeah, another like a lifetime ago. Yeah, it was about 2021, I think. Yeah, that you were
Yeah.
on the show the first time. We're now in 2024, and this is what it must be your fifth or sixth time then. I'm
I'm
sure.
honored you keep having me back.
Yeah, you've been on twice this year alone,
I
so
know.
yeah, this must be your sixth, I think. Yeah, which is pretty good. Um,
Love that for me.
yeah, I love that for you too. It's great. And I'll be on again. So, um, so anyway, yeah, welcome to the show, and we're
Thank
going
you.
to talk about something today, which I think is really, really interesting. And I've found something that's impacted my life, and I just want to learn more about it. And you're kind of an expert on this stuff, so and I'm sure listeners will want to learn more about it too. And that's kind of the astrological energy. By that, an example of that is something that a lot of listeners will probably be aware of, which is Mercury retrograde, right?
Hmm.
Um, and the energy that comes around then when technology doesn't work properly, when communications don't work properly, when emails don't send for some reason, or your email or text get blocked, or text don't go through, or internet doesn't work properly, or whatever, like for no reason whatsoever. It just, or your internet goes down or something like that. Like these sort of things just happen for no reason during Mercury retrograde, right? And there's loads of gifs around Mercury retrograde that people use on Twitter.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
kind of a common well, it's not a scapegoat because that's what it is, but people talk about Mercury retrograde a lot, and it's like we've been curious, like what actually is the energy of that, and where does it come from, and how does that
Mm.
happen? Like,
Yeah.
and we can use that as a kind of jumping off point, and then go into other
Yeah.
things.
I think
So,
that's great.
just
Okay.
give us a bit of an insight into that.
Okay. So, one thing to know is I am not I'm not a professional by any means. I would say I'm an intermediate when it comes to astrology. It's definitely something I've been studying for some years, and there's so many different branches of it. It's just fascinating. I learn new stuff every day. But Mercury retrograde actually happens multiple times a year, usually 3 to 4 times a year. We had one in December that led us into January 1st. We just had one from April 1st through the 24th. And in August is our next one. And then we have one more in November. So it's like, gird your loins. It's gross. But um, it's not the only planet that retrogrades, though, by the way. It's the planet Saturn can retrograde. I'm trying to remember what else. Jupiter can retrograde, Pluto, like all of the kind of major planets in the astrological chart go through a retrograde at some point. But Mercury is probably the one that we're the most familiar with, but the one that also changes most often.
So, what does retrograde actually mean when something is in retrograde?
So when a planet is retrograding, like the planet of Mercury, which represents our communication, both with how we receive communication and also how we externalize it, we communicate with others. That planet, when it's retrograding, it begins to turn the opposite way. So imagine like if you're set, the term like, oh, I'm spinning out or I'm spiraling out. It's kind of like that, the planet's just merrily rolling all along, and then all of a sudden it's like, and it starts kind of going back the other way. And part of the ways that we see this happening, like James said, is through a lot of it is actually, especially in our world in the digital age, a lot of digital communication. In my job, I work remote, and this is always a period of time where I have to like triple check, did I send that attachment? Are those typos gone? Did I blah, 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 blah? Because things start to go wrong. And it's like, they're always like sort of tiny little inconveniences at first, right? And they start to like needle at you. And then the more that you go, the more annoyed you get. And then you start getting all, hasty and impulsive and feeling just like everything is out to get you or to go wrong, because the more that the planet spins out, the more that we start to kind of feel escalated as well. And so it's a hard, like, it's not a fun transit to live through. I mean, at any time, it's always a pain, but I do always find that it teaches me something, and that is part of the spiritual goal of Mercury retrogrades, is that it's supposed to those times of the year when it happens, it's supposed to make you stop and go, oh, I thought this was going well, or I thought this was working, and actually it's not. How come? How can I realign this? What needs to be, it's like kind of like when you're building, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like an example, like almost like you're building like a Lego set or something, and you're like building all this stuff and it's your life, right? And then the Mercury retrograde comes by and you go, oh, I thought that tower I built in my castle was really sturdy. It's actually not. The wind just knocked it over. Now I have to figure out, how can I build this again and make it more sturdy? What's missing? Where does my ego get in the way? Where did I have blind spots? So, you'll start to notice things, even before the retrograde, actually, you'll start to notice shifts, because you made an observation, James, before we started the podcast, where you said that the retrograde, that we just had, like even the week before it started, you were feeling stuff, right? What were you feeling during that time?
Well, I started to notice that certain websites weren't working properly. That my emails like weren't get. I thought I'd sent emails and apparently I hadn't, and I started to get overloaded with emails as well, like overloaded with work, like too much communication almost.
Right.
And yeah, it was, and little things. You're right. You talked about it being little things,
Mm-hmm.
and all my tabs got like on my phone got like deleted or something, and I had to open them all up again. And
The worst.
yeah, just little things like that, and having to, and social media starting to go really slowly on my phone, having to turn off my phone and turn it on again. All those little things.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of are just annoying, but when you know it's Mercury retrograde, it kind of adds to the kind of frustration. Like, yeah,
Right.
um,
That's
yeah,
interesting you say that, because so this past Mercury retrograde, every time that it retrogrades throughout the year, it retrogrades in a different astrological sign. And so the one that we just had, and it just happened to coincide with the season we were in. We were just in Aries season. We're now in Taurus season, which is my favorite time of year, much better. But Aries, the Mercury retrograde happened to also retrograde in Aries. So the sign of Aries is a fire sign. It's very passionate, fiery, can be very outspoken, impulsive, can kind of like see the target and just blindly go for it full speed ahead, but like not actually check what's going on around them. And that's how
mm,
things get missed. Also, it can incite a lot of our more powerful emotions, whether that's for good or for bad, and how we choose to use them. And we saw it on a very interesting global scale with all of the college protests that started.
mm,
People became way more outspoken during this period publicly about what's going on in our world and what's, not okay, and just really began to sort of be the whistleblowers, or like use, the megaphone yellers. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but just people were being very like, I've had enough. Like, we're fed up. We're tired of all of the bullshit. We're tired of all the lying. We're tired of all these ways that our world is not operating properly. So
yeah,
that was one of the powerful like aspects of that retrograde period that was useful, because it informed people on what to actually be upset about. This is one of the
yeah,
ways that you can take a retrograde and what's happening around it, flip it to make it work for you, if that makes sense.
yeah. I mean, that's interesting because I definitely noticed that I've had more anger in me recently.
Mm.
Now, I mean, I want to kind of qualify that I had a major trauma anniversary, the kind of the week before we recorded this, so that was part of that, definitely, and there was no question about that. That, the build up to that, and then the day itself and everything, that definitely heightened my emotions and my anger.
Mm.
Well, grief, really, not anger. But even before that, I'd noticed that I was a bit more emotional, a bit more passionate than normal,
Yeah.
reacting to things in a way that I don't normally react to things.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that was during retrograde. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, and it was funny because every retrograde, about 2, 3 weeks before it even begins, we have what is called the shadow period, and that is where the planet isn't completely starting to spin the other way, but it's kind of like almost adjusting to do that. And during that period, that's when we start to pick up, like, ooh, like we're not quite sure if something's going to go wrong, but our intuition is usually more heightened during that period, or we're just noticing things that seem a little off, a little suspicious. Or maybe even people we normally talk to seem a little more on edge. Like you start to pick up on all of those signals. And then when the retrograde actually comes into play, whatever sign it's in during that time will kind of inform you of some of the themes of what could come out of this retrograde. So, one of the valuable ones, like I said before, that we saw was the amping up of the collective anger that our world is feeling, and the just being fed up with the oppression. And so it fueled a lot of resistance and anger, and that can be a very powerful, great thing. But it also fueled a lot of, like, the statement that just kept going through my head this retrograde was like, enough. I've had enough. This person's had enough. Like, all of my friends were texting me like, dude, I this is the moment where I no longer have any tolerance for this thing I've been putting up with for way too long. Like, those kind of things. Whereas if it had retrograded in Taurus, it may have been more of a slow burn. But with it being
Right.
in Aries, it was like, boom, you know what? No, that was the last straw for me. And I've been putting up with this for way too long, and I'm going to say something. So
Wow.
there's a lot of those kind of conversations going on too. Did you experience anything like that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, like, it was in a different part of my life that isn't that important in the big scheme of things, but I definitely felt that about something that I cared about a lot. Yeah.
totally. Yeah.
And it's kind of calmed down now, which is interesting. Like,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm curious about. Where does this energy like come from? Like, what produces this different kind of energy? Like, is it literally just the retrograding of these planets that just
Yeah,
produces a different kind of
it's
energy? Right.
really the planetary movements that are going on. And now I'm not a scientist, and I'm not going to be able to get into all the nitty gritty of it. But think about it this way. I say to people all the time that kind of like blow off astrology, and like, I'm not somebody. It's like everyone has to believe astrology, but if you're somebody that comes to me about it and then, like, just to make fun of it, essentially, I'll be like, okay, well, our bodies are made up of, I can't remember the percentage. It's like 60 something percent water, right? The
Isn't it
moon,
80%?
yeah, thank you. So the moon rules the tide that goes in and out every day, which is of the ocean, which is an entire body of water. We're made up of mostly water. Do you really think
Ah,
we're not being affected by those shifts as they move throughout the day?
that makes sense. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
That.
and it was interesting actually when I was in the UK um last summer, because I was there on a work thing, as you know, and I was singing in cathedrals and traveling around. It was amazing, but
Yeah.
one of the things that I was noticing at these different monasteries and cathedrals and stuff that I was visiting was how the monks and the monasteries lived. They would cycle their days like with the planetary hours, like whatever the transits were doing, they were doing daily tasks that aligned with what was going to work best with that transit. So, like, if it's the sun hour, they would get up and they would do this, that, and the third, and they'd have their breakfast. And then, oh, we're in the evening hour, and like now we're going to wind down and reflect. And like we still keep some of those things today, but you can
Mm.
structure it out even more than people realize. Like, even our days of the week are ruled by astrological transits. So, like, if
Right.
I, like Mondays are, that's actually why traditionally a lot of, people say, oh God, I hate Mondays. I hate going to work on Mondays. I da 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 da. Well, actually, that's because we're not really meant to be working on Mondays. Mondays are ruled by the moon, and that is a day of spiritual rest and reflection and preparing. Tuesday is ruled by the planet Mars, which is fiery, let's go get things done. Like, you'll notice a lot of people often feel more like they're getting stuff done on a Tuesday as opposed to a Monday.
This is so
It's
funny thinking about my life. I work at home. I work at home on Mondays, right?
right.
So it's a more relaxed thing. Like today, it's a bank holiday, so I'm not working at all.
Hmm.
But normally I work at home on Mondays, and then I go into the office on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then
Yeah.
I work from home on Thursday and Friday. And the days that I'm in the office, I wouldn't say I get more done, but I'm able to focus entirely on my work, not because I'm in the office
Hmm.
necessarily, but just because it's, I don't
You're
know,
aligned with the energy of that day.
the
You're aligned
energy is
with it.
different. The energy is definitely different. Like, I get lots of work done at home, like lots of work done. In fact, I have to sit through like a 6 hour meeting every 2 weeks at home, and minute
Yeah.
it. So I do have to do a lot of work at home. But the energy is definitely different when I'm on the Tuesday than it is to the Monday. Like that's what I'll
Hmm.
say. That
Yeah.
does, I do notice that.
So I'll give you a quick cheat sheet for anyone listening. But yeah, so Mondays are moon days. That's when you want to kind of rest, do your spiritual work if you have energy for it, kind of mentally, like spiritually, physically prep yourself for the week. This is a day that I'll kind of explain it how I do my week, but like that's a day like I kind of reassess everything and like look at my calendar and be like, okay, this is how I want to map everything out. Da da da. Tuesdays are Mars Day, which again, this is a great day for physical activity. If you're somebody that wants to get your body moving, I highly recommend that. Any big projects that are going to require a lot of like brain work, focus, physical focus, like this is a good day to power through all of that. It's also a good day for like your passion projects, like anything that's going to ignite that fire energy, essentially. Wednesdays are Mercury days. They're ruled by the planet Mercury. So it's funny because in Mercury retrogrades, I often notice Wednesdays can sometimes be more chaotic because they're already ruled by that. But that's the day I actually plan a lot of my work meetings on Wednesdays if I can, because I'm more naturally inclined to not burn out having to talk to people and listen to a lot of information being given to me and digested. This is a good day for writers, for writing stuff, for mapping out outlines, things like that. That's also a day I like to try to reach out to friends and catch up with them.
Wednesday,
Wednesdays.
yeah,
Those are Mercury days.
that's a day that I have a. This is so weird. Wednesday evenings, I have a Zoom call with a group of friends of mine every week.
Love that.
Like we have this little we kind of meet on Saturdays and Wednesdays, longer on Saturdays. We don't do anything like formal, just conversations, whatever, catch
Hmm.
up. Sometimes we talk about writing, and sometimes we talk about creativity. But yeah, and we do that on Saturdays and Wednesdays, and we're
I
doing it
love
on
that.
Wednesdays for like 18 months. Was it 2 years now? I can't even remember. But,
Wow.
but like yeah, Wednesdays. It's always on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting that we would just happen to schedule that on a Wednesday.
You're already you're already you're already sensing it. I love it. Yeah. And Thursdays are ruled by the planet Jupiter, which is the planet of expansion, opportunities, good fortune. It's a great day to apply for a job, shooting your shot it for something that you want, whether it's like asking somebody out or you're applying to that grant or whatever it is. It's also just kind of a more optimistic day. Like we're usually like, oh, one more day until the weekend. Like we're just kind of in more naturally high spirits. So it's a good day to seek adventure and new opportunities of any kind, good time to network, all that kind of stuff. Fridays are ruled by Venus. the planet of art, love, music, all the kind of creative pursuits, right? So this is a day that you can really lean into your self-care. If you're somebody that's like a content creator or something like that, like sharing personal things, art, photos, and also like taking the time to ingest that, like it, taking the time to, you know what, I'm going to spend some time researching that thing I've been wanting to know more about, or that artist that I wanted to write an article about. Like there's so many things,
Mm.
just taking in art, but also, and, community and music and beauty, but also sharing it. This is a day that usually like I do my whole like big self-care routine. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do the face mask, I'm gonna do the blah, 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 I'm gonna clean my room, I'm gonna make everything look nice, and I'm gonna play some music that puts me in a good vibe. And like it's just, yeah, so it's great for that. Um, we're on Friday. Saturday is Saturn Day, which Saturn is the planet that handles responsibility, karmic links, discipline, responsibility. This is a good day to, like, if it's the weekend, sometimes this is when we tackle home improvement things, or, oh, hey, I said I wanted to do this. I'm going to get everything together to focus on this week. Sometimes it's also a good time for harder conversations, processing our feelings, just kind of getting down to the nitty gritty of what it is that we've been avoiding or need to do. And Sundays are Sundays, literally,
Done.
like the, like,
Yes.
yeah. And it's supposed to be very like you get outside, you're with your community, um, you know, taking in, like, just enjoying the day, essentially. Like there's not really supposed to be a lot of activity that's like
Mm.
labor, but just activities that bring you joy and connection with
Yeah.
other
I
people.
literally never do any kind of work on Sunday. Like
Mm,
I don't even do housework generally. I do that on Saturdays if I'm going to do it. Like,
mhm.
or
That makes sense.
sometimes I do it. Sometimes I do it. Well, I'm ADHD, so sometimes I just randomly do it out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
But I don't never. I always, and this isn't actually something I consciously did, but it's just something that I've done. I've noticed that I've been doing. Yeah, I never do anything like that on a Sunday. I'm always chilling out, whether it's going out
Mhm.
for a drink or going for a walk or going to a pub or something, um, or just chilling at home. Like I don't do any kind of work on Saturday. I don't
Mhm.
even do any writing really, uh, or creative stuff really on a Sunday. Like,
Yeah, it's kinda
yeah,
like leaning into whatever most naturally feels good that day that you just
yeah,
wanna do, like, just letting yourself guide yourself. Self-guided adventure.
yeah.
That's
I'm
what
getting
that
married
is.
on a Sunday, so that's going to be fun. Like,
Oh, beautiful.
yeah,
I love that.
I'm actually quite glad I am now.
But yeah,
Yeah.
and so I've actually found it's been very helpful because, I'm also neurodivergent, and I've noticed that when I'm feeling overwhelmed, and sometimes I don't know like what to start with that day, what task to start with, I'll kind of start thinking about, well, what's going on? And, I'll check the daily transits on AstroSeek or something and be like, okay, well, here's what the energy of the day is. What can I do that's aligned with that? Because I know it's already going to be easier to work on. And if I try to work on stuff that's directly opposed to that, I'm probably just going to get a headache and be pissed. And so
Absolutely.
the retrograde amplifies kind of all of that, in the sense that those, like, maybe you're going about your life and you're doing your stuff, but there might be some things that you haven't been acknowledging, some conversations that have needed to be had. And sometimes you're just going down a path that maybe isn't for you. And the retrograde will be like, oh, we're showing up to redirect you. And I when things start going wrong and I know a retrograde's happening, like, there is the very natural response to be pissed and be mad, right? And I definitely get that way sometimes. But there's also a very big sigh of relief that occasionally comes to me, because if something just starts to go wrong or fall apart, I'm like, you know what? Okay, I must have been meant to redirect today. And I'm able to just sort of surrender what's happening in a way more intentional way than I could have if it's just a regular old day and I don't know what's going on. So that's another way that I try to reframe it for myself. I'll be like, this is redirecting me for a purpose. It's protecting me from something. But also I have to set uh what's the word? Not roadblocks, but kind of placeholders for myself where I know if I look ahead and I know when a retrograde's coming, I go, okay, I know I have to be these places. Traffic's probably going to be a nightmare. Everyone's going to be angry. There's going to be honking. There's going to be roads closed. Like I need to build in extra time to get to from this place to the next. Make sure all my apps are backed up, my tech. I work with crystals as well. My computer sometimes glitches. I tend to set a black obsidian crystal on my laptop at night before I go to bed because it helps with cleansing and purifying and protecting stuff. And so I I've noticed that sometimes there's been a few times where my laptop's flipped out and I've just shut it off and I've put a crystal on it and come back and then it's just like fine. So I have these little I've made my own cheat sheet of what works for me when a retrograde comes around. And of course you can't avoid everything. Like that's sort of the point is it's to bring up what is no longer avoidable, to be able to truly deal with it and process it. However, there are some things that you can do to help yourself to make it a little easier. And that's going to be vary depending on the person.
Right.
But it's definitely over the years, the more that I have leaned into it and embraced it for what it is, it has gotten easier to handle. But I am not going to lie, this last one really nearly did me in. This one was the worst I've experienced in a
Same,
while.
absolutely same. Like
Yeah.
I can't. It was like every day
Mm.
something was like I can't even remember it all. There were so many incidences,
Yeah.
right? And it was just getting. It was actually getting beyond the joke at one point. I was just like, I've had enough. Like, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Just like, this isn't funny anymore. And I was just like, yeah, I couldn't deal with this one. I think I was. It kind of coincided with a stressful time in my life as well, to be honest, because I
Mhm.
was dealing with a lot of stuff in therapy and dealing with a lot, and organizing a wedding, and then it was my mum's anniversary and stuff. Like, so it was all that as well. What just happened to coincide with it. So it was, yeah, it really wasn't a good mix of things.
Well,
Like,
yeah. Yeah, and if you notice, I don't remember in your birth chart because I've looked at James's birth chart before. I don't have any planets in my personal zodiac chart that are in Aries. So the fact that it was retrograding in Aries and it was affecting me on such a deep, like I almost honestly thought like, oh, this one won't affect me that much because I don't really have placements that are in Aries. So like maybe it won't hit me
yeah,
as bad as it will. It seemed to affect me more, which I found interesting. And so I was started thinking, okay, well, I don't have there's a lot of things in that sign that I admire. I have friends that are Aries, like things that I look at and I almost envy that they naturally have the ability to do that I don't. And I decided to try to reframe it that way, where I was just like, okay, well, why is this pissing me off that much? Why is this making me feel that helpless? What do I secretly want that I'm not admitting to myself? Because that's one thing I will say about Aries placements. They have no problem admitting what they want and they have no problem telling you. And I
yeah,
often I have a hard time as a very earth and water based person in my zodiac chart of like admitting even to myself what my desires are. And then when I try to communicate them, that's a
yeah,
whole other thing. Right. And
mm,
so
yeah,
um, I just kind of boiled it down. I was like, okay, well, we got to get down to the bare bones. Like, I want this. I don't want that. I love this. I hate that. I just kind of got very, very basic with what was going on around me.
right,
And I was like, well, okay. Now, some of these things are not in my control to remove right now, but what is? Okay, let's look at that. Don't really like that anymore. It's outdated. It doesn't fit me anymore. Tossed it away. And so I just sort of began kind of working through my brain and my daily routine and assessing. But yeah, it was it was a doozy. I mean, my world it was not a fun time. And then what's even more annoying, because I mentioned the shadow period, then we have the retrograde, then we have the post retrograde, which is another 2 weeks after it ends, which we are currently in, kind of. We're wrapping up the final shadow period of this last retrograde. And what that means is let's imagine a tornado, right? The shadow period is the tornado gaining more and more and more momentum. It's getting bigger, it's coming closer to your town. The retrograde is the tornado itself, what everything it wipes out, it clears it, whatever. Then the final shadow period is you surveying the damage. You're standing there with your hands on your hips going, well, this is what's left after all of that. What are we going to do with the pieces? How are we going to pick them up? How are we going to replace them? What do we want to do now? And we're in Taurus season now, which is my favorite time of the year for a variety of reasons. And it's an earth sign. It is the time of rebirth, renewal, planting seeds. It's ruled by the planet Venus. So it's a way more like just beautiful, calm, grounding time. It's a very sensory experience. Like Aries was like, I'm passionate and and I'm mad and and then Taurus season is like, oh, let's go and stop and smell the roses and like eat some really good cheese and have some wine and just like bask in everything that's good to be enjoyed, you know? And so that it's kind of encouraging us to find the optimism and the clarity of purpose and what's next while simultaneously staying present and enjoying what we now probably appreciate a lot more after all the weeks of drama we just went through, you know, like those simple pleasures. Like I've been thinking to myself every day, I'm not in a fight with somebody right now. That's a big blessing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Like there was a lot of conflict going on in my personal life, and you know, and we've sorted a lot of it out, and I'm thankful that it taught us something. But it's also like, wow, I'm just so glad we're having a night in and like enjoying a movie, and there's nothing going on. And maybe that's kind of boring, but like right now, I'm so thankful for that. You know, those just little everyday things. And so, um, yeah, I mean, I've just been spending this period trying to figure out like what lessons I took away from the retrograde and where I want to apply them next. And thankfully, we have the ability to look ahead with technology and see like the next one. I don't know what it's retrograding in, but it is in August. And, you know, so you can look ahead this time, James, if you want, and see what sign it's in, see how it correlates to your birth chart, what you want to prep for ahead of time. And,
well, August
you
August
know,
is going to be my first month in America after I get married.
oh boy.
So,
And, oh, yeah.
then I come back at the beginning of September, like, and then I'm going back in October again. So, oh dear.
If you're doing a lot of traveling, definitely get that travel insurance and stuff in case there's flight. That's another thing. If I'm
One of my
traveling,
flights has already been changed,
yeah,
like literally already. Like, um, and now I
yeah,
know why. Like, it's Mercury retrograde working ahead of time. Like,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
it should be.
preemptive
Yeah.
stuff. If you can buy the traveler's insurance, if did I went, so it was funny because I don't think I've actually told you this yet, but I went on a trip during the Mercury retrograde, which I try to avoid when possible, but sometimes it's not. And so I
Mhm.
just plan ahead. Well, I went to Salem, Massachusetts, where they did the Salem witch trials and all that. And I'd never
Oh
been
yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And here's what went wrong on my trip. I got pink eye somehow. That was so random. My car had the emergency light on, and they said it was safe to drive, but the part that I needed to get fixed or whatever, like it was going to be a couple days. So they were like, you can go on your trip, but whenever you drive on hills, it's going to be slow to accelerate. So just stay in the slow lane and like give it time. That's exactly what happened. So it took us like 2 extra hours to get to where we were going just because of my car. We were trying to buy things, and you know the internet wouldn't work when we were trying to pay for stuff with our debit cards, and like it was just things like that. But because I already knew, I was like, this stuff's just going to happen. It's going to happen. Like I went into it going, I'm going to have a damn good time. I don't care. And that's how me and my friend, where we were both witchy people, and she was like, I don't care. If something goes wrong, we're going to breathe through it and we're going to redirect and we're going to have a good time, damn it, because we never get time off and we want to appreciate this. And we did. We had a lot of little inconveniences, but I think we had the right mindset going into it because some of those things normally would have wiped out my day, in the past. Like I would have just let myself fixate on them and not have been able to move through it. And I felt like this retrograde, there was so much coming at me all the time that I really just I was like, well, pivot. Oh, another thing, pivot. I just kind of became a little bit devil may care about it because there
Yeah.
was no other option. So, yeah. What did
So
you feel like?
basically,
Oh,
go
sorry.
on.
Go ahead.
What
Go
were you,
ahead.
what were you gonna, no, what were you going to ask?
Oh, I was just curious what you felt like you learned from this retrograde for yourself. Besides, thank God it's over.
Oh dear, I think that was a difficult one. Like to be better prepared.
Mm,
I think to be better prepared for them, like be more aware of how it's going to affect me. I mean, I knew how it's going to affect. I knew how it's going to affect me, but like not to the extent that you've just gone into. Like some of the things that, like, yeah, 'cause I just got so like I got so immersed in the kind of energy of it. Like I was
mhm.
unable to kind of distance myself from it for a while. Like,
Me too.
and like some of the things I didn't even know were retrograde things, like the kind of anger stuff. Like I didn't know that was a retrograde thing. Like I was, cause I've been thinking, like, why is this extra anger in my body? What is this about? I don't know what
Mhm.
it's about, right? And now I know. Although I know some of it was about grieving and grief anniversaries and stuff like that, which is big. But it wasn't all that. It wasn't all of that. So I had a lot of, and now I know one of the reasons that might have happened. Because like, yeah, it was so. I think that's what I've learned. Like to be better prepared. Like next time, I'll be better prepared. Because I'm going to be when I'm in America, I'm going to be working my job here, but I'll be working from home over there.
Mhm.
2 weeks, 2 weeks of that month. So connection's going to be really
Yeah.
interesting. Like, and I've got meetings to go to, and I've got to get up early and stuff, like US time anyway for those. So that's going to be a really interesting time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna
Um,
be an adjustment for
yeah.
sure. And one of the other things too that because you said, well, this where is this anger coming from in my body? And also you brought up that there had been like, a grief anniversary for you. One of the things that the retrograde also brings to pass is past people, situations, memories, cycles, because it's giving us an opportunity. For some people, it like we'll give the most basic example. Let's say somebody's had an on and off again relationship with someone in their life, and the retrograde brought that person back around, and they're like, "Hey, I wanted to talk to you. I miss you. Can we start over?" You get to decide in that moment, does this cycle continue because they're still behaving the same way and it's the same shtick, different day? Or have they actually gone away and done some work and come back? And now we're ready to both align differently with each other. That's one of the very common things. But it can also be like you said, the thing about the grief anniversary, it's really easy sometimes. Like for me, it's actually easier for me to lean into anger when it comes to grief than sadness. And maybe for you it's the opposite. You may be more
Yeah.
comfortable in sadness than the
Hmm.
anger, and maybe your body was telling you like, hey, I don't need you to, I need you to know that some of this is in here and it's going to come out sometimes, and that can
Yeah.
be overwhelming.
And there may have been a bit of anger because maybe I had a part which, and I'm talking about internal family systems here, a part that, uh, was angry with my mum for not being here, and I
Totally.
wanted her here. And that would be normal. And I wouldn't blame myself for that at all. That would be a normal reaction. That manager probably was formed when my mother died, right? But hasn't been needed until now, right? Because I wasn't getting married, so I didn't experience any of those things because it never happened. But as soon as I'm getting married, those things from like 24 years ago, kind of like, oh hi, I'm still here.
Hmm.
Um, so I have to go and do that, and that's what therapy is for. That's why therapy is so useful, because I'm able to spot those things and we're able to deal with them. So yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So you
And
can thank Mercury Retrograde for bringing that to light in a sense, but
exactly.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
and that's weird that you mentioned the kind of. I knew the thing about like people from your past contacting you randomly or something, or and or you contacting people from your past or whatever. And I ended up doing that during retrograde for a
Mm,
completely normal reason. But it was because I was arranging something and I
right.
had a spare ticket and I was like, and I just got in touch with somebody that I thought would like to come, and didn't hear back. But um, yeah, so it was my stag do. So it was a guy that I used to know a few years ago, and then but I didn't get hear back from him, and it turned out I didn't need him to come anyway because we figured out a way anyway. But yeah, so that was kind of a thing as well. Like,
Yeah, sometimes it's
yeah,
even just random like I had a couple random colleagues in the music world that just appeared back in my orbit, and it was like, "Oh, hey." And sometimes those people pop up and it's almost a blessing because it's, you see them and you go, "Oh my gosh, like we've always meant to sit down and grab coffee and talk about that thing we wanted to do together." Right. So sometimes it can be very helpful. And it being an Aries, that again, that fire impetus gives us the passion of like, I've had enough and I'm going to do the things that I've been wanting to do that I've not made time for. Like, enough's enough. Like I even had that with some stuff where I just got really fed up with my own bullshit during the retrograde a little bit
mm,
too. And I had to sit myself down and be like, you know what? We need to re examine some of your blocks here and why you deliberately get in your own way, and like have that space and sympathy for myself, of course, but at the same time be able to like gently hold myself accountable to do what's best and next for me. But I also had some, it wasn't for me like exes coming back around, but for me it was conversations. Like, me and my partner had some conversations that we've never really finalized, but they would be conflicts that would come back around, and we would sort of have the same script for every argument, right? And then we would kind of like neutralize it and move on. But this time we had to be very clear with each other. She had to say, these are the things that I just know for me, like I have to give my 100% focus to now. And I need to be doing these things. And these things are hindering me. And the way that we interact in these ways hinders me and you. And I had to do similar things and go, you're right. But also, I have these very firm boundaries that I have not been enacting in my life when it comes to anybody, not just you, but like while we're on this, I need to be clear and actually stick to these for myself because they're good for me. Right. And it wasn't like all this, like, I hate you and I wish you'd leave. It wasn't anything like that. It was just kind of like these moments where we both realized, oh, we're actually not helping ourselves at all. And since we can't do that, we're also not showing up very well for each other right now because how can we when we're not doing it for ourselves? So I think
mm,
it really clarified what we actually cared about deeply instead of more what we just felt like we should be doing, if that makes sense. So,
yeah,
yeah, that was one of those for me. Sometimes it's repetitive conversations that come back around to be like, okay, how can we look at this differently or tackle this differently this time?
yeah.
Yeah.
There was actually a time. There was actually a friend from my school I'd not seen since we were at school 30 years ago, who I've been talking to vaguely on Instagram for a while. And we just got coffee, and we
I
just
love
saw each
that.
other for the first time for 30 years, and it was really good. We had a really good time and caught up. Like, and we're probably going to do it again sometime.
I love that.
Like, so that was again all these things like coincidences or not, I don't know. But this is really, really interesting. I've learned a lot today, and I think it's going to help me a lot. I think there's a lot of people as well who know what Mercury retrograde is, maybe, but don't have the full understanding of the energetic nature of it and its impact. So, who will probably be really helped by today as well. I think.
Hmm. Well,
I
good.
know there's a lot of listeners to this podcast who know all about Mercury retrograde and are fully immersed in it and have experienced it and and have been through all the things that we've probably been through with retrograde. So yeah, thank you, Kat.
You're so
That's really
welcome.
cool. Yeah.
I
Where can
love to
people,
ramble.
absolutely, like, but it's not rambling; it's wisdom. So it's great. So, where can people find you and your work and all the things you do?
Oh my goodness. You can find me on everything, all socials, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter at Cat with the Cards. That's CAT with DA cards, with the cards. I also have a newsletter called Cat with the Cards on Substack. I have been neglecting it. I'm actually trying to figure out what I'm going to do with it. I might turn it into a podcast myself. I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do with
Awesome.
it.
That'd
But
be cool.
yeah, but that is there, and it is free, and there is a lot of stuff on there already if you want to check it out. But yep, that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. Do check all that out, my friends. It's really, really good content. And Kat does tarot readings for me quite regularly as well.
I
They're very
do.
good. And
Yep,
they're
my
very good at what
bookings
they
are
do.
open. I have all that
Absolutely. And
available.
they're relatively cheap as well, inexpensive, I would say, but very, very good value for money. Been very
Thank
helpful
you.
for me. So, yeah, of course. So, thank you for listening, everybody, and have a great week.